Thank you for joining the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. Love to have you. Love that you came. Talk about all things real estate today. I'm your host, David Rabior, Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest, Clyde Realty, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. You can reach me at 313-451-0448. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is another balmy, today I think is like 30 degrees, so it's not that bad. It's been a lot worse. We're getting by. We're trying to, get through this winter. Just give me 1 second. Trying to get through this winter. We're trying to not freeze to death. Today I drove all the way up to Harbor Beach, which is about, hour and a half away from Detroit, going north, past Port Huron, all that good stuff. And up there, there was probably 24 inches of snow. I went to my barn. I got a property up there where I hunt and stuff like that. And I was up there and, I had to get my truck. I have a big, 2500 Chevy pickup I use for like towing my boat and stuff like that. And there was a leak. I had to get that fixed. So I took it to a mechanic. Anyway, I go all the way to Harbor Beach, bring my buddy Captain Tom Drake, everybody. Give him a round of applause. Anyway, we go all the way up there. And as you get up north of Port Huron, Lexington, Port Sanilac, it's a lot of open farm fields, and the wind was just howling today. So there were snow drifts all over everything. I get to my barn with the truck to try to back it back into my big pole barn, and there's like 24 inches of snow. Get my four-wheeler, put the plow on that thing, drive it down, hit it, four-wheel drive, pound the stuff, can't even move it, can't even move the snow. So I had to skim it off the top and then go down a little bit, skim it a little bit and get to the bottom and, take a whole running start to try to get it to move just enough to where I could get this truck, in the barn and stuff, because I don't drive it during the winter. I only use it for hauling like my big 30-foot boat I use and stuff. And if I need to haul a heavy trailer or something for a job, I'll use that truck. So it's not often that I actually do. And today was one of those days where thankfully it was a big old heavy truck with four-wheel drive, and I was able to blast my way through what was left of it. But, that's pretty much this winter, 2025, in summary. It's been like 30 degrees as a high, but for the most part, it's been like 15, 17, 25 is like the top. At night, it's extremely cold. It's not cool. It's not fun. I'm over it. It's February 22nd today, and I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired when it comes to this weather. But pretty soon, it's Michigan. This weather is going to break. People are going to be happy again. I know I will be. And, it'll all be a memory. So anyway, today we wanted to get on here, have a little podcasty, talk about this, talk about that. And today's episode is how to fail as a landlord, how to fail at being a landlord, however you want to call it. And I onboard new clients all the time, and I have a lot of clients, that I've been working with over the years. But every year, a good amount of people come into this market, and they look around, they talk to a bunch of people and stuff, and then they find me, and then we get on a call, and we talk about their aspirations as a landlord, their aspirations as an investor, who they are, what they want to do, all that stuff, and every time there's expectations that I want to go over with them, like their expectations or lack thereof, to be able to be realistic about, what it takes to be a landlord and like what comes with it and stuff like that. And, these people, they come in and they're like, yeah, I just saved up my first 20,000, or I saved up my first 30,000. I want to come into the market. I want to get DSCR and, buy my first rental, and I want something turnkey, and I want Section 8, and I want the house to have no problems, and I want to put a Section 8 tenant in or buy one, particularly with a Section 8 tenant. And, then I'm going to go in there and I'm going to raise the rent and max it out. And they look at all these Section 8, HUD guidelines for what like the rent should be for Section 8, which are all a fantasy. Like that's not real. You look at that sheet and it says Section 8 pays like $1,700 for a 3-bedroom or something. It's just like, it doesn't happen. Like, not only are they not paying that, they're paying like $1,300. And in a lot of cases, they're actually they're actually like renegotiating the rent. I've also seen where we qualified a tenant and we put them in there, and then they came back and they renegotiated with the landlord after they already agreed. We fill out the tenant packet. We put in there what we want. They come back and say they're willing to pay. We do the Section 8 inspection, and then the tenant, gives a security deposit. They sign a lease. They move in, and then a month or 2 months later, they come back and say, yeah, we're not going to pay that. We made a mistake, and now we're only going to pay $100 less than that or something like that. And then if you try to dispute it, they'll tell you like, well, maybe we should just remove the tenant and, try a different way. And at that point, are you really going to go back to someone who just gave you a security deposit? They've been living in your house for a couple of months. They've already done, a little bit of wear and tear damage. At that point, there's going to be something. You're not going to be able to just get them move out and, stick another person right in there without any problems. And, you have to make a decision right there. Do you want to, draw a hard line and tell them, yeah, get your tenant out of here, and then try to, place another tenant and hope that doesn't happen to you again? I mean, that's a rough call, and a lot of people, they don't want to roll the dice there. So then they end up thinking they're going to get a certain amount, and then they don't. And that's pretty disheartening, but I've seen it happen, and that's pretty hardcore, man. But these agencies, like lately, Section 8, I'm telling you guys, it sounds like, and it looks like on paper, like this is a great program. And, it sounds like it's all going to be guaranteed money and stuff, but there's a lot that comes with Section 8 that you guys may or may not understand. And the problem is, if you don't understand, by the time that you do understand, it'll be after you learned a very valuable and hard lesson a lot of times. And people are just convinced that they're going to find Section 8 tenants, put them in their house, and they're going to get rent. There's going to be no problems. And that's just absolutely not true. First thing is, generally, like people on Section 8, they have a lot of people living in the house of various different ages. But, what is the program designed for? It's for people that, need help and assistance. And most of the time, it's single fathers or single mothers that have, 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, whatever they have. I mean, it could be up to 5 or 10 even. I mean, I've seen 5-bedroom houses with like 8 occupants in there where Section 8's paying a hefty amount of rent and stuff. But, having that many people in one house under one roof, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of toilets flushing. That's a lot of sinks running. It's a lot of showers going. There's a lot of cooking being done in the kitchen. It's a lot of everything being done, and that a lot of everything equals a lot of wear and tear on your property. And a lot of people don't really realize that. And then having that many people is going to equate to clutter in a lot of cases. And a lot of people that are landlords are not mentally aware or prepared for like what that kind of living condition does, and how challenging it can be to deal with that. And especially for somebody who doesn't relate to the people who they rent to. And then, you go and get a walkthrough on video, or maybe you go there yourself with your property manager, or you have me take you or something, and you go in there and you look at the way that person lives. And to you, maybe you never lived in that situation and you don't understand it. And you go in there and you're like, oh my God, this is a culture shock to me. I've never experienced this before, and it makes you severely uncomfortable. But to those people, that's how they live. It's normal to them. They don't see anything wrong with it. Or maybe they know that it's wrong and they just don't care, And when you're a landlord, one of the biggest problems that I see is, someone comes here, they want to buy a turnkey property, or they get a property that needs a tenant. Particularly, that's where you can really do your due diligence and try to place the right person. Because if you don't, this is a failure point for landlords, And if you buy a property and, just because the tenant's on Section 8 and they gave a security deposit and they moved in and stuff and the rent is really high, it doesn't mean that they're taking care of the property. It doesn't mean that they give any respect to the property. It doesn't mean anything. Like, it's all conditional on the person, the way they are, what they believe in, and how they live and all that stuff. And the way that they believe and how they live could be completely opposite from what you believe that they should be doing. And to you, you don't understand, or you think it's wrong, but to them, they don't really see any problem with it, or they just don't give a shit, right? And that's something that you have to deal with, because now they're in your house, right? And you paid money for it. And, you've put some repairs into it, or you got it with the tenant, and then you had to go in there because the guy before you or the lady before you, they didn't do rental inspection. So now you, to hold rentals, legitimately have to do rental compliance. So you can use the Section 8 inspection and pay money to give that to the city as proof of your rental inspection. And if you don't have that, you can get a rental inspection, and then you use that report, which you got to pay money for that person to come out and do your inspection. And if you don't pass, you have to do repairs, and then you have to pay them to come back out again. And then you get that rental compliance certificate after you get the rental inspection, or you get a passing Section 8 inspection. And then you have to do a lead-based paint inspection, which is expensive. It's between $500 and $600, or it can be more depending on the size of the property. But for a single family property, you're like $500-$600, on average. And then they come in and they check, and if you have lead-based paint, residue, or you have peeling and chipping paint or anything like that, they can require you to make certain repairs. So that costs you money. So now, whether you bought it with a tenant or you didn't, and you placed your own, at some point you have to do these things. And if you don't do these things, then you don't get your certificate of compliance, which is good for 3 years. When you become rental certified, if you pass through all of these health and safety inspections and you prove that your property's in, legal and livable condition and all that, cool, you can get your rental compliance, and that's good for 3 years from the date of issue, but you still have to get annual reinspection for Section 8. And then when they do that annual reinspection for Section 8, if your tenant decides that they want to tear down the smoke detectors and pull off the carbon monoxide detector, or they don't want to change the batteries in it or whatever, like when they come out to do this inspection, they're looking all over again for the same stuff that they looked for when the tenant was placed. If you buy a house and the tenant's been there for, 8 or 10 months or something, and you do your home inspection and you renegotiate based on things that you see, then in a few months you're up for another annual reinspection. And when you get that, now the inspector could come in and they can say everything is great, which is almost never. But if they don't do that, and then they tell you that you have to get certain items fixed, now you're into making repairs again. Whereas if you put a cash paying tenant in there, you get that certificate of, CFC, certificate of compliance, you put that tenant in there, and now you're good to go for 3 years. You don't have to do anything. And where most landlords fail is they start getting this misconception that like Section 8 is the answer to all their prayers. And that's just simply not the case. One of the biggest failure points for a landlord is, one, buying a house and not understanding what it's going to take for it to become performing. Or buying a house and not understanding that like wear and tear is going to occur, and that maintenance will have to be done over a period of a year, over a period of 5 years. You're going to have the tenants going to be calling you. They're going to be calling you saying that something's wrong. They're going to be calling you saying that the toilet is running, or, that when they run the laundry, water is coming up from the basement floor drain. And maybe it's because they don't put the net on the ejection, hose for their washing machine. So all the lint gets in there and it causes the backup. Maybe it's because they, their kid dropped a toy in the toilet and it's stuck under the flapper. Or maybe because they are too hard on something or whatever. But at the end of the day, certain things, when they call for maintenance items, you're going to have to do. Certain things are going to call you, and, you can say, hey, you did this and you need to pay for it. But ultimately, if they have no money, right, if they say, I don't have any money to repair it, you as a landlord have a responsibility to keep your property in a certain condition. And that's why a tenant gives you a security deposit. And the people, which leads into my second point, the people who have a huge failure point are the ones that buy houses. Maybe it's in in the time of the year that's not favorable. Maybe it's like you buy a house in November, you buy it, it's not occupied, you buy it for a good price, you want to do a rehab and stuff, and you do everything that you can, and then you put it up for rent, and then it sits for a while, and then you start becoming more desperate to get a tenant in there paying rent, because now you have DSCR financing or something like that, and you're paying bills, or you're just uncomfortable paying water and gas and electric and the taxes and stuff and not having no one in there, or maybe you're just afraid in general that someone's going to break in and steal your furnace and your water tank, or steal your vanity sink, or maybe that's actually happened to you when you did a rehab, you fix it up nice, you're marketing it for a tenant, and then someone breaks in and steals like your furnace and your water tank, and now you're like super motivated to stick someone in there, and you agree to do it for like next to nothing. Like that can work if you do due diligence before you place the tenant. There's tons of great people out here that want to be tenants, right? And they will come and apply, and you can make their application based on the review of, their credit score and their employment verification and their criminal background and all these different things that we use as landlords to qualify a tenant. You can put someone in there for a very low EMD. If they qualify, there's lots of job having, work every day adults that need housing that are glad to be a good tenant, and they don't want to be bothered and stuff. And I have tenants like that where they work, they're responsible, they paid the bill, they don't want to talk to me, they don't want to call me, they don't want me coming over there, they don't want me bothering them, and that's fine. Right? You treat my house like it's your own. I don't want to see you either. I don't really think we need to talk. That we have a lease, that I have a house, you want to live there. I know that I want a certain amount of rent. You understand that. You pay the rent. And if there's nothing that we need to talk about as far as maintenance goes, I don't want you to call me. There's no reason for us to talk. We're not friends. This is business, right? But if you, as a landlord, the biggest failure point that I have seen is, excuse me, when you get a house and it sits too long, maybe it's because you're unrealistic about how much rent that you should really be getting, right? A lot of people come here and they're like, I want $1,400 for a 3-bedroom home. You got to use your brain, that's what an agent like me is for. You'd come to me and you'd say, before I buy this, what will it cost me to get it operational, whether it's got a tenant or not? And then how much will I rent it for? And then we're going to go into the area and we're going to highlight that particular neighborhood, and we're going to look and see what is currently for rent, what your competition is, as they say. And then we're going to see how many things have rented in that area and what they've rented for. And you have to be in line with that. You can't say, well, I paid more, so now my payments are more and I need to charge more because, I'm into it for more. No one cares, right? And it's the same way when you're a flipper. A lot of flippers fail because they get a house, they have a budget, they blow the budget by 10 or 15,000. And at the end, they're like, well, I want to charge $15,000 than what we originally talked about because I put 15 more thousand. But the comps are the comps. People are only going to pay so much. So that happened to me this year where a guy bought a house and I told him, these are the repairs that you need to make. This is how much it's going to cost you. These are the guys that are going to help you do it. And when you're done, you need to list your property for $130,000. And it needs to be done before it gets cold. And it didn't get done before the time came that we thought it should. And then when he put it up for sale, he put it up for sale for $35,000 more than what I told him that it should sell for. And it sat there and no one even looked at it for months. 2 months went by every day, every week, multiple times. This guy's asking me, why is my house not selling? And I kept telling him, because you listed it for too much money. It's not even realistic. Agents aren't even going to take their buyers there to see it because they know even if they put it under contract and they love it, it will never appraise. And if it doesn't appraise, their buyer loses $600 to $700 for their appraisal. They lose their getting their hopes up, right? Which can potentially make them not want to buy anymore. They lose money on the home inspection. They lose money if they get, pay money to get the camera, in the sewer, right? The camera inspection or whatever. So now they're into it for $1,100, $1,200, $1,300. And then the appraisal comes back and you're not even close. You're off by 30 grand. And then if they come back and try to negotiate, the seller's like, nope, that's what I want. Well, you're talking about a first time home buyer. A lot of them are getting down payment assistance or they're using FHA. They don't have $35,000 to make up the difference. So the deal is dead. And the only person, and everybody loses really. I lose because I don't make a commission. The agent loses because they don't make a commission. The seller doesn't get paid and they get no profits and they don't get their money back. And then the buyer loses by getting their hopes up and getting their hopes and dreams stepped on because you're not realistic. And then they also lose $1,200, $1,300 for all the money they spent to get them to the point where they're told that now all the stuff they did was a complete waste of time. We can't do that. And it's the same when you're trying to rent. If you put more into it than you should have, it doesn't mean that it should rent for more, right? The rent is pretty much a market value. A 2-bedroom is going to rent for $1,000, $1,100 or $1,200, right? And a more older, non-updated property is going to rent on the low end, right? And the one that's more updated is going to rent on the high end. And, Section 8 voucher is going to pay you what's going to pay you, but you also have to find someone with a voucher up to the amount that you want. And that's not how it always goes. They're issuing vouchers for below what you think that you should get all the time. And then when you try to send it to the Section 8 agency and stuff and negotiate, a lot of times they're negotiating the price down. Like I've had more negotiating with Section 8 agencies over the last year than I've ever seen. Like we go back to them and say, the rent, we want $1,300 or we want $1,350. And they come back and say, we can't do that. We can only pay $1,225 or something like that. And then if they're a really qualified tenant, the landlord has to make that decision. And sometimes they say, nope, I want the higher one. And this is where they fail. I want the highest rent. And I want to stick that person in there. And the rent is the most important thing. And rent is important when you're a landlord, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is qualifying your tenant, like really qualifying them. And in order to qualify them, this is the way that it's done when you're trying to rent your property. Like, I'm just going to give it to you straight. And then if you have a property management, if you're not a customer of mine or you're looking to become, an investor, or you're already an investor, and we don't talk, and you're just listening to this podcast because you down deep in your heart know that I'm better than your agent, which is probably true. But, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. But deep down in your heart, you're listening to this podcast because you want to know, if people who you're currently dealing with are shooting you straight or if they're bullshitting you or whatever. In a lot of cases, people aren't bullshitting you to the point where you don't listen so much, where they just start going along with what you say, because it's easier for them to do that than it is for them to argue with you every single day or a couple of times a week, because you're just way off and they're trying to be honest with you. And then there's some people that are just straight up bullshitting you the whole time and leading you to believe that the promised land is this unattainable number, because if they don't, you won't buy. And if they don't buy, they won't make any money, right? So I hope you understand that's the game. So if you're, in the market and you're looking to rent it, this is what you got to do. This is the baseline situation that you have to be kind of ready for and make yourself adapt to this. And you got to have heart in that. You can't give up, right? You have to have stick-to-itiveness or whatever they want to call it. What you need to do is understand that your house, before you rent it, you need to look at it and say, if I needed to, I could live here. You can't have the house with no heat on, unless it's the winter. It's Detroit. You got to do what you got to do. But for example, when the tenant pulls up to the property, they have to be able to pull up, get out of their car, stand at the street, look at it, look to the left, look to the right, look behind them across the street and say, wow, this looks like a place I want to live. You're not going to get that in a D-class area. They're going to look across the street and see board ups and see some guy sitting down at an abandoned house 3 doors down, or, the house next door is a burnout or something like that. Someone who gets out of their car looks at that and says, well, I'll live here. That means no one else will really rent to them, and they're just willing to take whatever. And that's probably a bad sign that they're not going to be a good tenant. And you don't want to have houses in those type of areas, because you're never going to make any money off that, and you're going to hold it forever. People aren't going to stay a long time, and then you're going to have to keep putting tenants in over and over. And every time you do, you're going to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 because you're going to trash your house, or it's just going to have general wear and tear, which costs you money. But generally, you have to start with step number one, finding a spot that people actually want to live. And there's reasons why people want to live there. Is the street clean and nice? Is it close to, parks? Is it close to certain grocery stores, certain amenities and stuff that they really need? Is it close to their kids' school? Can their kids walk to school? Can they drive their kids? Do their kids go to a charter school? Do they go to public school? Whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And the step number one is the tenant has to be able to pull up and look at that house and go, if I could get a chance, I would live here because it's really nice. The neighbors look nice. The street looks nice. Everyone's grass is cut or their snow is shoveled. There's not trash. There's no abandoned houses. There's no burnouts. There's no crackheads running around, hooting and holler at them and stuff like that. That's step number one, right? Buying houses in the right area and making sure that you fix them up to be conforming with the area. People don't want to open the door to a beautiful home and see a piece of shit, where it's barely livable because everything's duct taped together with, Elmer's glue and, Gorilla tape or whatever. No one wants that, right? So that's step one. Buy good houses in good areas that people actually want to live, that are close to the things that they want. And then you'll have people that are running over there trying to get it, right? That's step number one. Number two, if they do live there, they're close to all of the things that they really want or need. And then it's not convenient anymore for them to consider moving anywhere else because they have everything right there where they want to, right? And people will pay more to live in areas where they're close to things that they want. They'll pay a premium for that over, paying more to live further away from that. And that's the main thing. You got to have good houses in good areas, and you got to fix them up nice, and you have to make them rental compliant. That's step number one, right? Step number two is marketing your property effectively. That means making it be ready for someone to go inside, look at it, and say, I could move right in, right? If the toilet is in the tub because they didn't put it back down on the wax ring and bolt it down because of whatever, you don't want that. You don't want every cabinet door open in the kitchen. You don't want to have smells because you didn't put where the cleanouts are for the sewer, the caps get removed because you snaked the drain and no one put the caps back on, or no one put a plug in that hole. And now you got sewer gas. So now the house smells like, an outhouse inside. People do this stuff all the time. You want to make sure that all the sinks work, all the toilets work, the laundry tub works, shit's not leaking. You want to make sure that it's clean. It smells good in there. All these things. You don't want to have walls that look like a cheetah because instead of painting the wall one color, you went and tried to spot paint it with the same paint, but it shows up and now you got spots all over that you can see. These are things people understand that the rent is high. $1,300, $1,400, $1,200, whatever it is. If it's a 4-bedroom or a 5-bedroom house, you see rents as high as $1,600, even $1,700. You don't want to lose a tenant because they walk in and the house doesn't look like they can move right in. That's what your job is. Your job is to buy good stuff in good areas and fix them to where people want to live there, and make sure that when you're renting them, they show up and the house looks good as it does in the marketing. And a lot of people, they don't even get the marketing right. Especially property management companies do this all the time. They send some guy over there with a 2005 Android phone or something that's got the lowest quality camera, and they just go in there and they take random shots. They don't even go into the corner of the room and put their phone on a wide angle, on a wide angle. So they get the whole room, with the ceiling and the floor and the walls and everything where you can really see it. They just go in there and take these horrible photos, and then they put watermarks on their photos, which makes it even harder to see. And they don't even document the whole interior and exterior of the house. And they put that online, and people are so used to shopping online. They go on to Amazon or eBay or Facebook Marketplace or wherever they go, and things that they buy are the things that look the prettiest and the shiniest a lot of times. Everything on Amazon is cheap Chinese crap for the most part. The ones that you buy are the ones that are prime, and you can get it fast and they look good, and then you click on the reviews on there, and most of those are bot reviews, but you look for the prettiest, shiniest thing that has kind of the best reviews that you're going to get the fastest, and that's what you want. Landlords don't understand that tenants are online and they're house shopping and they're swiping, and things got to pop, and then they look at it in the area it's in, and they look at it, and that's when they contact you. So you got to make sure when they do that you are ready to set the hook on that fish and reel them in, and marketing is key for this. You have to make sure that when you market these properties, they look good. And when they come in person, they look the same as they did when you marketed them online. And if you do that, their expectation of what they think they're going to get is fulfilled when they show up and it looks the same. Instead of all these houses in Detroit that I look at as an agent, off topic, they put one shot or they put a couple shots of the house and it looks okay. And then you get there and you're like, what the hell, man? This thing is a piece of total shit. Why not put real photos on there so I don't waste my time? But they do this all the time because they're trying to sell you something and they want you to go there, just by any means necessary. Or they're just too lazy, which is another big problem. They're just too freaking lazy to drive their dumb ass over there and get photos of the whole house inside and out. So they'd rather sit home and field phone calls all day. Hey, what does the house look like? Do you have any pictures? How many bedrooms are there? All the things people call you, you don't need to do that. If you give them all the information, up front with your marketing, then they don't need to call you because they already see what it looks like and where it's located and what kind of people that you're looking for as buyers or renters or whatever. Like, do your freaking job, right? That's the biggest problem I have as an agent. People don't do their job at a very high level. And then I try to work at a very high level and be as efficient as I can. And those people slow me down. I'm always running uphill with a backpack full of cinder blocks because these people, they don't want to make it easy and show you all the stuff. So you can like look at a deal and analyze it and whatever and save yourself a trip when you can see it looks like shit. There are people that want to buy that turd. I'm not one of them. So I don't want to like go there because there's only one shot from the street that you screenshotted off Google Street View or whatever. And then I got to go there, I open the door and like the house was on fire. There's a hole in the floor. Or there's a squatter in there or something. Like you got to put all that in there. And when you're trying to be a landlord, it's the same thing. Make everything be the way it is in person. Make it be that in the photos. And the way that is in photos, make it be that in person. That's step number one. And if you don't do that, you will fail as a landlord because everything you have will sit forever and you'll end up taking tenants, anyone that you can put in there instead of the person that you want to, which leads me to the second point. Like the application and review process for the tenant is absolutely key. You should be willing to take less money for a tenant that qualifies, like really qualifies. You know, you run them, their credit, their criminal background, their employment history. Maybe they give you some referrals. They give you their check stubs. They give you all the stuff. And you look them up and you're like, okay, they don't have any kind of record where they're not some like child molester, like attack, violent offender, drug dealer or something. They have no like criminal record that is really a problem. Like people are going to have a ticket for, smoking weed when they were 15 or something, or maybe they got drunk driving 20 years ago or 10 or something like that. Like people go through stuff, right? It is what it is. It's like, if you can see a pattern of someone not being responsible where they don't pay their bill, their credit shot, and their credit score is low, and you open up their report and it's because they don't pay anyone, they're not someone that you want to rent to. Someone who got their car repoed in the last year, like the most important thing in their life that they have is their car because we don't have good public transportation. So if they got their car repoed and they don't have any explanation for why that is, then they're probably not a responsible bill payer, and you don't want them as a tenant. You want people who are responsible adults with gainful employment that want to live in your house, treat it respectfully, and pay their bills on time, and their credit means a lot to them. That's what you want. So when you go and you validate a tenant, you want to look at their criminal background. You want to look at their credit score. You want to make sure that they can turn all of the utilities on in their name, gas, water, electric, all that stuff. The main utilities, they need to be able to do that, right? Because if you're going to be a landlord in Detroit, you want your tenant to have the water in their name with a tenant water affidavit. That way, if they don't pay their bill or whatever, you're not responsible for it. So you turn that water on in your name, and then when they move in, you force them to go to the water department, sign a tenant water affidavit, turn the water on in their name, and now they're responsible. And if they don't pay their bill and they move out or they get evicted or something, the water bill follows them because they gave their information to the water department, and now you as a landlord aren't stuck with it, okay? So that's another, pro tip or whatever if you didn't know that. If you leave that stuff in your name, you're surely going to get screwed. But that's step one. They got to be able to, step two, you want to make sure that they are responsible, step number one, and that they qualify. And step two, you want to make sure that they can turn on the utilities in their name. You want to make sure that they don't have anything related to like paying of their major responsibilities, gas, water, electric, internet, cell phone, car insurance, these type of things. This is what you're looking for. You want to vet a tenant that shows that they're responsible, because when someone shows that they're responsible, it's really hard to be responsible, right? If you're a responsible adult, you relate to what I'm saying. It's easy to be a person that screws up all the time. And when you run somebody as a tenant, if you see a pattern of them getting in trouble or not paying their bills or whatever, and it's all the time, it's every year, or they have balances with everyone, like they don't pay anybody, or they pay and they're late on everything. Like, what do you think is going to happen when you put them in your house? You got to qualify the tenant. And I would rather take $1,200 on a $1,400 rental for someone who has a real job and like a respectful adult who's responsible, who pays all their bills on time, that doesn't have any real record, like I would give them the house for $200 less than I would give to someone who is like, let's say Section 8 getting guaranteed quote unquote rent. Like if they don't qualify, they don't qualify. And there's a price to pay for putting a non-qualified person in at a lot of money. You know, a lot of money is really good. If you get more money every month and you have no problems, then it's a grand slam. You know, like you can't get any better. The problem is the higher the rent that you put someone in for, if they're not responsible, especially with Section 8, it could start off where the rent is $1,400, but after 3 or 4 months, they could reevaluate the tenant. Now they have a tenant portion that they have to pay that's $400 or $500, and now they can't pay it. And before, like 2-3 years ago, their tenant portion might be 50 or 100. It's not like that as much anymore. Like their portions are a lot more. And before, if you had a house that, let's say it was $1,350 and the tenant only paid, 50, and they didn't pay their portion, it was like, am I going to evict them over $50? Like, no, I'll just make up for it some way, or I just turn a blind eye. But now, if you put a tenant in there at $1,350 and they renegotiate to $1,250, and then all of a sudden 3 months later their portion's $500, now they're not paying. Now you're not making any, you're not gaining any ground here. There's no momentum to that. And that's where most people start really panicking, because now they have a tenant living there and they want to evict them. And the minute that you say that you're going to evict them or you serve them, then now Section 8's not paying you either. And now you got nothing. You have to sit there for 3 or 4 months until you get them out and hope that they don't do damage and stuff. So tenant number 2, step 2 is like really focusing on the right applicant and making sure that you don't put the wrong person in your house. That's one of the most important things you'll ever do. And then the third thing is, what I like to do is, when you're going to screen a tenant yourself personally, and for those of you that use property management, you'd have to sit down and really talk about their processes. Some of them, they can't rent houses for a long time because their qualification process is so difficult for a tenant to qualify for. They go through a lot of applicants before they find one, but they're doing that because they don't want to take the chance for 1 second that they put the wrong person in. And then the more motivated you get as a landlord, you start demanding that they put someone in, and then they throw someone in there, and then you end up with someone who's not being qualified. That's a big problem, right? So you want to make sure that you keep your expectations in line, and you want to make sure that you don't cut off your nose to spite your face. And the last thing that I wanted to say, you want to make sure that when you're, potentially dealing with a new tenant, one thing that I do, this is a pro tip, I ask them to, they come and they look, they call us and they're interested in the house. And then we don't make them apply first. We'll pre-qualify them based on a questionnaire. And then we'll open up the house for an open house, maybe on a Saturday for a couple hours, and we let a bunch of people through there. And then, we get people that are really interested. And at that point, then we charge them money for the application and everything. And we try to make sure that they qualify and stuff, because we're looking for, people that are going to come live, be respectful, and that are responsible adults and stuff like that. And then once we get to that point, what I like to do is, once I qualify them, or maybe I qualify 2 or 3 or 5, I ask them if I can get on a Zoom call with them from their personal residence, or I'll go to their house where they live. And I'll ask them, hey, before I place you, do you mind joining me on a Zoom call, or do you mind if I come over to your house where you're currently living and have a conversation with you and stuff like that? And if they won't allow me to go to their house, okay, cool. Will you get on a Zoom call with me? And then I get them on a Zoom call. And then once I get them on a Zoom call, I'm like, hey, do me a favor, just walk through where you live and show me how you live. And if they won't do that, automatically I'm not going to take them. And if they do that, then I get a chance to see how they live. They don't know that's coming. They don't know that I'm going to ask them that. And that's one thing that I've done for a long time. I either show up at their house and see where they live. I always call their landlord referrals, and then I try to go where they live, or I get them on a Zoom or Google Team or whatever you want to use. What I'm talking about. Maybe it's a Facebook Messenger chat call, on video, or it's the old iPhone FaceTime deal, whatever, right? You get the gist. Get them on there, and then have them flip their camera around and tell them to walk through their house just so you can see. And if they're not willing to do that, then they're hiding something or whatever. And you don't have to rent to people just because they applied with you. Like, they have to qualify. You can't discriminate against people about their, their age or their race or their gender or like who they prefer to have a romantic relationship with or whatever. But what you can do is be very stoic in how you qualify tenants. And this is one thing that I like to do. And I don't discriminate against anybody that wants to rent from me for any reason. I'm just looking for people who are going to be clean, neat, and respectful, that have responsible tendencies in their life. And I feel like they're more trustworthy, and it's a safer bet for me to do that, instead of what most people do, is demanding that every tenant be a Section 8, and then, putting a Section 8 tenant in there, choosing the high rent over qualifying that tenant properly, or the house sitting so long they get tired of trying to be so regulatory in how they pick a tenant, and then they just say, fuck it. Let's put anyone in there. Just put someone in there right now and get the highest voucher you can. Just stick them in there, and you roll the dice. Every now and then you're going to hit a 7, but most of the time you're going to crap out, and that's when you crap out. And when you do, if you put the wrong person in there, it's going to be a problem. You're going to regret it. They're going to cause damage. They're going to cause you turmoil. It's going to be stressful. You may have to do eviction. It's going to cost you a bunch of money and time, and you don't want to do that. But anyway, I appreciate you guys listening to the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. David Rabior, 313-451-0448. You can get me on my website, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. You can find me on the social medias. You can find me on the Facebooks, the Instagrams. You can find me on Bigger Pockets. You can find me wherever you want to find me. Do me a favor, though. Like it. Follow me. Whatever. Drop me a good review. Follow me on Spotify, Facebook. Follow me on Apple. Whatever you want to do. It really does go a long way. And I really genuinely appreciate all of you guys who take time to listen to this podcast. Anyway, David Rabior, Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest. We out.